Look, Tessa is talented, but someone has to have the vision. She executes, I create. It's a simple, effective dynamic. Zane's voice, smooth and reasonable, filled the podcast studio. The glare from the single spotlight on him was a blinding white sun, and in that moment, the low hum of the recording equipment was the only sound in the universe. I sat in the small audience, my face a perfect mask of supportive collaboration. His smile was a carefully crafted brand asset, the one we'd designed together. My response was a whisper, lost in the air before it could reach the microphone. That's a very expensive mistake. I met Zane at an industry mixer 5 years ago. He was the magnetic center of every conversation, all charisma and bold ideas, while I was the quiet one in the corner with a portfolio that did the talking for me. He saw my work, a series of minimalist app interfaces for a startup, and his eyes lit up. He said we were the missing halves of a whole, his voice my hands. Our first project was for a boutique hotel, the Hotel Serafina. We stayed up for 3 straight nights in my tiny apartment, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a shared frantic energy. When we landed the contract, he lifted me off the ground in a hug, shouting, "We're gonna make it, T." That night felt like the foundation of everything. First red flag was a small thing, a crack so fine I painted right over it. He presented one of my initial logo concepts to a potential client as something he'd whipped up on the flight over. When I confronted him, his apology was a flood of remorse. He was just so excited, he got carried away, it would never happen again. I believed him because I wanted to, because the alternative was too lonely to consider. The next 2 years were our golden period. We were Zane and Tessa, the design duo everyone was talking about. We landed the Veridian Dynamics rebrand, the user interface for the Nomad travel app, a feature in Design Weekly. He was the face, the one who took the meetings and charmed the clients. I was the engine, the one who lived in Adobe Illustrator and Figma, translating his grand pronouncements into tangible, award-winning work. He said he was protecting my creative time, shielding me from the boring business stuff. It made sense. I trusted him. The imbalance was gradual. My name got smaller on the presentations. Payments started arriving as contractor fees from an LLC he'd set up, not as partner draws from a shared account. He'd explain it away with talk of tax efficiency and liability protection. I'd nod, feeling vaguely foolish for not understanding the nuances, and get back to work. I rationalized every oddity, every solo meeting, every delayed payment. The work was too good to question the dynamic that produced it. The illusion shattered on a Tuesday. Client from a recent $75,000 project accidentally CC'd me on an email to Zane, referencing the final payment transfer. It was a simple, devastating clerical error. Zane had told me the entire project budget was $40,000. He had wired me my half, $20,000, a week earlier, calling it their best-paying gig yet. For a full minute, I just stared at the numbers on my screen. The extra $35,000 wasn't a typo. It was a choice. At night, I didn't sleep. I began a quiet, methodical excavation of our shared history. For 3 weeks, I was an archaeologist of my own betrayal. I cross-referenced every invoice I could find on our shared Google Drive with my own bank statements. I paid for a premium subscription to a document recovery service to unearth deleted files. The picture that emerged was wider and deeper than a simple financial skimming. He hadn't just stolen money. He had registered the trademarks for our most successful joint projects solely in his name, listing me as a work-for-hire contractor. He was systematically erasing me from our own story. Breaking point came at the Creative Futures Conference. Zane was a keynote speaker. I was in the 3rd row, sitting next to 2 industry peers, Paula and Marcus, who congratulated me on our success. Then, during the Q&A, someone asked Zane to describe our collaborative process. He leaned into the microphone, a picture of magnanimous leadership. Collaboration is a generous term, he said, his voice resonating through the auditorium. I'm the architect. Tessa is the bricklayer. Very skilled bricklayer, mind you, but you don't put the bricklayer's name on the blueprint. A few people chuckled. Paula shot me a concerned look, but I felt nothing. The sound in the room seemed to warp and fade, leaving only the sight of Zane, bathed in the spotlight, standing in front of a giant presentation screen. On it was a slide detailing the project timeline for the Nomad app. It was a tiny, insignificant detail, something no one else would ever notice. It falsified the start date, shifting it by 6 months to a time after he'd officially registered his solo LLC, to make it look like his company, not our partnership, had originated the work. I had the original Figma file on my laptop, metadata intact, proving he was lying. In that cold, silent moment, the entire plan locked into place. My first call was to Ms. Vance, an intellectual property attorney with a reputation for surgically dismantling creative frauds. Her office was stark, all glass and steel. Her advice was colder. Don't show your hand, she said, her eyes fixed on mine. Let him build his own gallows, we'll provide the rope. The retainer was $12,000. I paid it without blinking. For the next 6 weeks, my life was a double act. By day, I was the compliant partner, finalizing projects. By night, I was a forensic archivist, compiling our 5-year history into an unshakable fortress of evidence. I backed up every email, every text, every time-stamped project filed to a secure server. One evening, Zane saw me running a massive data transfer from our shared cloud. He asked what I was doing. I told him I was just organizing local backups for efficiency. He nodded, satisfied, and went back to taking a call on the balcony. He was too busy being the architect to notice the foundation cracking beneath his feet. The evidence was damning. There were 47 emails where he called my initial concepts visionary. There were screenshots of the Figma files, showing my user ID as the sole creator of the core design system. The mismatched invoices, a text from 2 years ago where he admitted, "That logo concept you sketched on the napkin last night, I pitched it this morning. They loved it. You're a genius." And of course, the fraudulent trademark filings from the USPTO website. The ironic flourish came from a former intern who now wrote for a major tech blog. He emailed me out of the blue to ask for a quote on an unrelated article. I now had a direct line to the press. The final piece of the plan was a decoy. Ms. Vance sent a polite, legally sterile letter to Zane's lawyer, requesting a formal mediation to discuss the amicable dissolution of the partnership. Zane walked right into it, seeing it as his chance to buy my silence with a pittance. The mediation room was beige and soulless. Zane sat across the mahogany table, flanked by his lawyer, looking relaxed and confident. He opened with an offer of $20,000 as a parting gesture of goodwill. Ms. Vance didn't respond. Instead, she slid a single sheet of paper across the table. It was the client's $75,000 invoice, placed right next to the bank statement showing his $20,000 payment to me. Zane's smile flickered. His lawyer leaned in to look. That was the first wave. The second was a thick, 50-page binder Ms. Vance placed on the table with a soft thud. She calmly narrated its contents: the emails, the metadata, the text messages, the trademark filings. Zane's lawyer, a man named Peterson, began to look pale. Zane was sputtering, trying to reframe everything as a misunderstanding. Then came the killer proof. Ms. Vance turned to the large monitor on the wall, and then there's the matter of public misrepresentation. She played the video of Zane's keynote speech. She paused it on the slide with the fraudulent timeline. Then in a split screen she pulled up the File Explorer showing the original file's metadata. Created by Tessa. Date created, 6 months before the date on his slide. Zane went ghost white. Opened his mouth, but only a choked sound came out. Peterson put a firm hand on his arm, silencing him. My client is prepared to file for damages of $150,000, plus full legal ownership of all disputed intellectual property, Ms. Vance said, her voice like ice. Or you can sign this. She slid a settlement agreement across the table. Zane stared at it, his arrogance finally collapsing into a pile of ash. I hadn't spoken a word. Now I did. Said I was the bricklayer. I leaned forward slightly. This is me handing you the bill. The settlement was signed before we left the room. The story, carefully ceded to my intern contact, broke 2 days later under the headline Design Darling or Deceitful Duo. Zane's empire of charm crumbled in 24 hours. His social media became a graveyard of angry comments from clients and peers. He had to sell his downtown loft to pay the settlement and his own legal fees. I saw him once, months later, heading into the sterile glass tower of a mid-level insurance firm, the kind of corporate gig he always mocked. He was holding a sad-looking salad in a clear plastic container, and for the first time he looked exactly like what he was, a man with no vision. I opened my own studio. I called it Foundation Creative. My new office is a sun-drenched space downtown, minimalist and bright, with a waiting list of clients who came to me not for a charming pitch, but for the quality of the work. The quiet is the best part. It's the sound of earned peace. Last week, the same podcast that started it all asked me on as a guest. The host asked about my philosophy on collaboration. I smiled. I believe in true partnership, I said. An architect is nothing without a brilliant team of builders. A smart architect knows the building is worthless without a solid foundation. I didn't just build a new career. I finally owned the blueprint to my own life.